Hi, we're here today with Paul Holes and Barbara Rae-Venter. Paul, Barbara, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background for those who don't know, which might only be a handful of people at this time.
So, I started out my career as a forensic scientist, and then became this, what's now an archaic job class for the sheriff's office, a deputy sheriff criminal. So I had to go to the police academy to do the CSI work and, basically do the very beginnings of DNA. But I found myself always being pulled towards the investigative aspect. And so during the course of my career, I started getting more and more involved with investigative side, in particular on cold cases and serial predator type crimes, and then ultimately finished out my career as a cold case investigator with the DA's office.
Fantastic. How about you?
Well, I'm a retired patent attorney, and as part of my retirement, I was planning on working on my family history research and playing a little tennis and doing some traveling. And as I started doing my family history research, I started getting matches with people who were adopted. And I really didn't know how to help them find their birth relatives. And so I took an online class through a group called DNA Adoption. And what they do is they teach you how to do genetic genealogy.
Fantastic.
And at one point there was a detective in San Bernardino who contacted us, wanted some help on a case. And that was the Lisa Jensen case, which got me started on doing all this.
That's amazing. So you were working in patents. Did you ever foresee this is what you would be doing in your retirement?
No, not at all. This is definitely a left turn.
I pulled her into it.
It's pretty amazing. It's quite the story. And so you're obviously here to talk about the Golden State Killer case and how that came to pass. Paul, maybe you want to start and just give us a little bit of background for those who don't know.
Well, the Golden State Killer was an offender that committed at least 50 attacks in Northern California, most sexual assault cases, and then moved down to Southern California where he started killing people. And that was the series that I was working and investigating. I started out as a forensic scientist looking at it, doing DNA work, and then I moved into the investigative realm. And at a certain point in 2017, that's when I ran across Barbara and what she had done on that Lisa Jensen case, because I had a connection to that case. And I was like, how did that happen? And so I had reached out to Barbara saying, I need help. And initially I didn't even tell her what case it was. I think I said something, if you help solve this case, it's a cold case, but it'd be a feather in your cap.
That's exactly what you said.
Right, because it's such a big case. And she was like, sure, send me what you got. And then I didn't hear from her. And then she pops up in 6 months later,
yeah.
Right? And she said, hey, do you still need some help? And I'm like, yes, please.
That is incredible. What did you think when you first got the call?
Well, I'd actually been already working on some cases, and so it just it sounded intriguing. And so I said, sure, be interested in working on it. And then unfortunately I had some health issues, and so it took a little while, and then when I was recovered, I called Paul back, and the rest is history.
That's right.
That's amazing. So now this was an unsolved case for how many years? I mean, really?
44 years.
44 years. And then how long was it working together with the team that you worked with before you were able to?
It took us about, 4.5 months. Once we got the initial DNA results, 4.5 months to the time that D'Angelo was taken into custody.
That is incredible. Now, how did you work together as a team?
So, well, a lot of it was done via email and over the phone. So I had initially talked with Barbara, and then we were emailing. And then on the law enforcement side, we had a group with 2 individuals down out of the FBI in Southern California, and then I had reached out and got 2 individuals up in Sacramento. We created a centralized account in order to be able to do all the genealogy work. And so we are all just, remotely, for the most part, doing this. And Barbara would, take a look at the trees that we're building and tell us what we were doing wrong and correct us.
Actually, you were doing pretty good.
And that's really, that's how we were interacting. Now, of course, I'm interfacing with the law enforcement guys on the team every now and then. So I'm going up to Sacramento or I'm meeting with the FBI. But this is literally the second time that Barbara and I have sat down face to face in person.
Okay, that's remarkable. I mean, there's been so much press about this. There's the Time 100 Most Influential People, and you wrote the introduction for Barbara, which was beautiful. I mean, to think that you're just meeting in person for the second time. What was the first meeting?
Was at a bar.
That's ideal.
And I forget what conference. They were at a conference.
It was the I4GG conference in San Diego, and I was giving a presentation. And you were shooting what?
I was shooting a case for the Oxygen Network. It was the death in the mansion. And so I was down in Coronado and they were down in San Diego, and it was like,
it was the whole team.
It was the whole team. So that literally was the first time that the whole team was in the same room at the same time.
Okay, that is amazing. Any good stories you can share from that meeting?
Oh, we were all well behaved.
I believe it. That sounds incredible. Well, what attracted you to this show?
So, which, you're talking about the San Diego show?
No, the ISHI, for this, where you're presenting.
So actually, Promega reached out to me last year, and they were looking for a keynote speaker, and because the Golden State Killer and the technique that really, Barbara kind of, was innovative with, and we kind of followed Barbara's lead. That technique has touched off such a revolution within law enforcement, and so many other cases have been solved using it. They said, hey, we'd love for you to come here to just talk about the case, the Golden State Killer case. And so that's why I ended up coming here.
That's amazing. It was a great presentation.
No, thank you.
Do you think, or how do you think things would have been different if the technology we have today in DNA in general was available in the 80s when you were working on the case initially?
Well, I'd like to think that we would have been able to solve this case and prevent further victimization. I think that's what DNA does do this. There's other tools, there's other investigative aspects that get the bad guys off the street to prevent them from reoffending. But when you take a look at these kinds of crimes, like the Golden State Killer cases, and the horrific experiences that both people that are still alive today that were victimized, and they've lived with that trauma, or the people that lost their lives, and the family members, and all the pain that they still experience to this day. If this tool had been available, back then, my hope would be that we would have found D'Angelo and at least saved some of those lives.
Yeah, he was quite sadistic in his methods.
He was.
Yes.
He's definitely a psychological sadist, and he really enjoyed inflicting that fear.
Yeah, oof, it's hard to hear about, but I mean, thank goodness that coming together within a couple months, you guys were able to.
And it wasn't just the victims either. I shared a story with you last night about a man who came up to me after one of my presentations, who said he was a little boy at the time that the East Area Rapist was active, and how he had a sliding glass door on his bedroom.
Yeah.
And so at night, he's like 12 years old. He's sticking a dowel in it, and he's going to bed with his BB gun.
Right, and I hear that over and over again. People that lived in Sacramento at the time that the East Area Rapist was attacking, who's also the same person as the Golden State Killer, or even in Davis, where there's only 3 attacks, but because of the type of attack and who he's attacking just the everyday people in their own home. Anybody could have become his victims. And so it caused fear in the community because everybody's recognizing, I could be a victim of this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It is the nightmare. It's the thing that you don't think happens very often, and then it was happening repeatedly.
And it could happen to you.
Yes,
That's right.
Absolutely. What were some of the challenges you faced in getting his DNA?
Oh, the kind of an interesting aspect is I actually had DNA from 3 cases in Contra Costa County. But over time, as different technologies came on board, I'm dipping and consuming more and more of that DNA, because initially I do the old technology, the first type of DNA testing that my lab had, this DQ alpha polymarker system. And then we consume more DNA because now we had the great STR technology that we could put up into CODIS. But then that didn't solve the case. Then you start looking at, well, there's this genealogy side with Y STRs. And so I end up consuming everything else I had, thinking, well, that's, CODIS isn't doing it for me, so maybe genealogy with Y STRs would do it. I didn't know anything about the SNP testing at all. I spent 6 years pursuing YSTR leads, and then I find out about SNPs. I have no more DNA left. So the challenge at this point was me reaching out to the Southern California agencies with homicides and asking them, do you have any DNA left in your cases? And some of them did not, or they never had enough, or the type of DNA because it was too mixed with the victim's DNA, and it just didn't work. And we were just fortunate in this case that in the Ventura homicide, Lyman and Charlene Smith, that the pathologist in that case collected 2 sexual assault kits, one that he gave to law enforcement, one that he kept in the coroner's office. Well, that got forgotten. So law enforcement kept dipping in and consuming the DNA from the one kit, and then when myself and Steve Kramer went and briefed Ventura about this new tool that Barbara, was championing, and we're saying, okay, do you still have any DNA left? That investigator from Ventura starts digging, and he discovers that untouched sexual assault kit. And it turned out to have a gold mine of Golden State Killer DNA in it.
That is so fortuitous. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, wow. So let's talk about what advice you might give. Barbara, if somebody wanted to do some investigative, how would they start? Would they contact you? Would they contact someone else? I mean, obviously this is a burgeoning field and everybody wants to know, where it's going to go. How do you see it being used?
Well, where they're going to have to start is with the evidence that they have, because it's really going to depend what they have. As Paul was just mentioning, it's important that you have single source DNA that is not mixed with some other person, which makes it then too difficult to work with.
Okay.
You need to have enough of it that you're going to be able to create the SNP profile. And from there, then you need to be working with a genealogist to try and interpret the results that you get.
What do you think the future holds now that many cases are being solved in this manner?
I think it depends on what happens with the rules that we promulgate to protect how this work is being done, and that people are careful with how they use it, so that we don't end up getting people upset so that they say you can't do that anymore.
That's a fantastic point, putting protocols in place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, and we're starting to see that happen, and I would say like within California, the Sacramento DA, Anne Marie Schubert, has kind of led that charge where her office developed what she's calling best practices, and which all her law enforcement agencies need to abide by and to use the genealogy tool. And then she's passed that to other jurisdictions within California, and I think it's promulgating across the nation. And so as we move forward, we want to see, we do want to see standardized protocols put into place. And my fear is that legislators are going to have a knee-jerk reaction. And they're going to say, oh my God, law enforcement is tapping into people's genetic information, and I've got to pass a law banning this, before they educate themselves as to what the tool really is. And that's my message to any decision maker, is understand the technology so you don't implement some restriction that is going to negatively impact public safety.
That's good advice across the entire field. I mean, really, breakthroughs have been happening repeatedly over the last, 30 years. So, right, we're just going to keep moving forward. So I read an interesting article in the New York Times that said that you receive a lot of packages of serial killers' hair. I think it was by Heather Murphy. I don't know if you remember doing that interview. I was curious about that.
I'm actually not the recipient of the hair.
Oh, you're not. Okay, so you're
I use the results that Dr. Green comes up with from processing the hair.
Okay.
But actually the labs send the hair to Dr. Green. And then he has this new technique that he uses where he can get nuclear DNA out of hair strands, which is a very, very new finding.
Okay.
And we actually used that to solve the Allenstown 4 case out of New Hampshire.
Wow.
So if it wasn't for Dr. Green, we wouldn't have been able to solve who those people were.
Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So obviously things have changed for both of you probably in the last 6 months to a year. What is that like after solving this very high profile case in a unique way?
Well, I would say I have not had a break since we had a press conference announcing that D'Angelo had been arrested. My life has been a whirlwind, for better or for worse, but I'm now very much on the media side. I'm doing shows on TV. I've got a podcast, and my platform is really to try to continue to help law enforcement agencies with their unsolved cases, even though I'm doing it from a television or a podcast perspective. I still want to keep my fingers in that investigative role, and so that's what I'm doing now, and it's great, but it's a lot of work. So it's been a grind.
It is a lot of work, but I did really admire what you said in your presentation about being upfront with the media and sharing what you could to leverage that to assist with public safety, versus having a fear of speaking to somebody, which is a great approach.
And that's what you see people who are so jaded against the media, and that they don't even want to talk to them at all. And then that ends up polarizing, let's say, your local newspaper reporters, and they're suspicious about what law enforcement is doing. And then next thing you know, that's when you start getting negative articles, which, just develop a relationship and just be open.
That's a great way to do it. How has your life changed?
Well, I kind of chickened out at the beginning. I asked to be anonymous.
Okay.
And so Paul gallantly stepped in and protected me. And then at some point when other people started doing it, and I wasn't the only one out there, then Paul did a tweet outing me, as it were.
Yeah, she gave me permission, though. She gave me. Yes.
Okay, I like this.
Barbara said, "Hey, I'm ready to, be known that I had involvement with the Golden State Killer case."
Okay.
And so I just tweeted out, and I had a number of Twitter followers at this point, and I just tweeted out saying, "Hey, the genetic genealogist that helped solve the Golden State Killer case was Dr. Barbara Rae-Venter." And then
it took off. Yeah.
It took off.
Did you need to get a new phone number then?
Well, actually, I'm fortunate. I have a landline that I use for that, and I don't give out my cell phone.
Perfect.
So, I mostly get stuff through my website.
Okay.
Lots and lots and lots of media requests from folks like Netflix and whoever else. Wanting to do, sort of like you've gotten, I guess, we're trying to do series and what have you. And I'm still very actively working on cases, so I really don't have time to do all of that.
Okay.
I've actually solved another, what I had up to 20 cases. Some of them are with the GSK team. Some of them are just on my own since the Golden State Killer.
Okay.
So I've been very busy doing cases.
I'm sure, and people really do want to hear about it. And understand how this happened. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us anything about the shows that you have coming up?
Well, I've had a couple of appearances on shows on the Oxygen Network, and I've got a contractual relationship with Oxygen. And so I have a series coming out that's premiering October 12th. It's called The DNA of Murder with Paul Holes. And it's not a show about DNA. It's me doing active investigations, working collaboratively with law enforcement agencies, and literally trying to solve these cases. And it's going to be hard. I'm spending such a short period of time on each case. But my hope is that the law enforcement agency and the victims' families feel that my show has advanced the case in some way, and we want to tell the story about who the victim was, the trauma that the families are still experiencing to this day, and seeing if I can come in with my experience, my expertise, or even just fresh eyes and see something in the case that can help the agency kind of get it to where now they can go out and make an arrest.
That sounds wonderful. Any TV in your future?
Not at present.
Okay, well, we'll be watching for it just in case.
She'll be on my show at some point.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's unavoidable at this point, right?
Yes, I guarantee it.
So, Barbara, I think this is your first year at ISHI.
No, I actually came last year.
Oh, you did? That's right. Now, the reason I don't remember is because you really kept a low profile.
I tend to do that.
You couldn't say anything, and this was before you were outed on Twitter, I'm assuming.
Actually, I had just come out.
You had just come out,
and I actually had a very interesting experience at the meet and greet evening. Of course, I didn't know very many people at the conference, and so I'm sitting at a table with some ladies from the Austin CODIS lab. And so, we sort of talked about what they were doing, and they said, "So what are you doing?" And I said, "I do genetic genealogy." And They said, well, you know, have you worked on any cases that we might have heard about? And I said, well, I worked on the Golden State Killer. Oh, you're C.C. Moore?
Heard about that. Oh, no, gosh.
Right. Well, but I think, you know, and that does underscore, you know, you do have, you know, a private company that CC has been working for, and they get a lot of publicity. But the GSK team has just been quietly working on these other cases, and other cases have been solved, but people don't realize it's the same people that were involved with the Golden State Killer.
Which is right,
Yeah.
so interesting.
No, we've solved several cases.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is why we, you know, love to have you at the show and, you know, share that with the community here. Paul, I think you've been coming to the show for quite a long time. I heard you were like early Scottsdale days.
I was, you know, I went to 2 conferences, I believe 1997, 1998 in Scottsdale. I'm not sure about those years. And it was, at that point, it was a pretty big conference because it had been around for about 10 years,
Okay.
but nowhere near what it is today.
Right.
And,
yes.
and I hadn't gone to one since because I had promoted up, and so I wanted my DNA analyst to attend. And so I was pushing them to the Promega conferences, or now ISHI. And so this is my first time back since the late 90s.
Oh, so that's interesting. Compare and contrast. What's it like now coming back?
You know, I'm here under for a different reason. You know, there I was going to hear all the talks and learn about all the new DNA technologies and statistics and all the court battles that were going on back then. Now I'm coming, you know, of course I'm the keynote speaker and I'm talking about my case. And for me as an investigator, I really don't have the interest to go in and start hearing the fine details about how to interpret this mixture off the electropharogram. That's not me anymore, right? I'll let the other people handle that. Just tell me what I need to know. But it's been great, you know, bumping into all these people and meeting them. I mean, of course, there's people that I've known from way back when out of the forensic world within California. But I'm also meeting new people from, I mean, you have people from the Netherlands that are here.
Yes.
I mean, this is a global show.
It's true. So many countries. I mean, it is remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And what have you thought so far? Last year, this year?
Well, I do go a little bit more to some of the presentations. More, I'm interested in finding out what other people who were doing what I'm doing, what they're doing, to maybe get hints on things that maybe could help me with some of my cases. So I did go to the workshop yesterday that was put on doing genetic genealogy, and I plan to go to the presentation that Colleen Fitzpatrick and Margaret Press are doing. You know, just to, you never know, you might pick up a few little extra tricks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, what's next for you both?
Well, I know for me, it's really the media stuff. That's where my focus is at this point in time. I will continue to be filming for the show, and then I have a podcast, Jensen and Holtz, The Murder Squad. So I'll continue to be recording for that, and you know that's where I'm at right now, and who knows what the future holds.
Right. Right.
And I will just keep riding this wave, and you know, if the shows don't work out for whatever reason, I'll just be retired in Colorado and taking my Jeep out into the middle of nowhere and enjoying nature.
That sounds good as well.
Yeah.
And but I think there is a lot of interest. I mean, I even hear there's trending Twitter hashtags, but we don't have to talk about that.
Yeah.
I shared what your hashtag was.
I'm sorry, I had to ask. I'm gonna have to look it up now, but yeah.
No, there's a whole world out there. I know it's out there, but I don't even pay attention to it.
No, I understand. I know. I'm glad you're out there. Don't let that stop you. How about you? What's next for you?
Well, what I've been doing is a lot more in the realm of education. So I do a number of presentations. I talk to anything from little genealogy societies who are just sort of interested in learning more about unknown parentage solving cases. And I then talk to law enforcement groups, do workshops, and then of course I'm also working on my cases. So that's pretty much what I do.
Yeah.
And since I'm also theoretically retired.
You're both theoretically, I don't know, that doesn't.
Right.
Maybe sometime I'll get back to playing tennis and doing some traveling.
Right, maybe. Well, anything else about the case or your work together that we haven't covered that you want to make sure this audience knows about?
Oh, wow.
GEDmatch.
It's a big question, but
GEDmatch.
GEDmatch, let's talk about that.
Okay. You know, I think obviously we used GEDmatch as part of the process in order to solve the Golden State Killer case. And at that point in time, there was a lot of profiles that were in the database that were searchable. Now we've seen where there's been this new policy of the explicit opt-in to allow law enforcement to search. And that's caused GEDmatch basically to lose so much information that it's not a useful tool for law enforcement at this point in time. And the hope is that we want to see that turned around. And that's going to be ongoing discussions as we move forward. And I know Barbara's going to have a whole different perspective. I just want to see it where we can make it as big as possible so law enforcement can benefit and public safety can benefit from the information that could be contained within GEDmatch.
Okay, what's your take?
Well, I guess what I'd like to see is somebody who has deep pockets do an advertising campaign. I think a lot of people don't even know GEDmatch exists, who've done DNA testing. They've tested at Ancestry, they've tested at 23andMe, they've tested at MyHeritage. And if we could get the word out to those people to please download their files and upload them to GEDmatch, upload them to Family Tree DNA, which is the other site that we can use for doing forensic work, that would be huge. It would be absolutely huge. Because right now there's only about 625,000 people, I think, who've opted in at GEDmatch, and that's out of about 1.25 million. But if we can make the database bigger with some of those folks who don't even know that they exist, that would be really huge.
That sounds great. Thank you both, Paul, Barbara, for sharing your thoughts and taking some time out when it is so crazy and busy for you both, I know. We really do appreciate it, and we're so happy you're here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.